leading the Confederate forces, and he must have had a bit of an anticipation of what was going to happen in the future. And so as he was giving his troops the pep talk before the battle, he is supposed to have said, "Gentlemen, tomorrow will be a hard fight. I want you to fight courageously, and then I want you to run for your lives." And then he added, "As it is that I'm a bit lame, I'm going to start running now." I think sometimes that's the way we look at the future. We're feeling a bit lame, so maybe we ought to start retreating as fast as we can now. God knows things aren't as we want them to be. Things certainly aren't as they should be. And so we look ahead, and sometimes we have to challenge ourselves. Do we think that the solution is in the past? Or do we hear the Christ who says, "Follow me," and who tells us there's no looking back? There isn't a solution that going back is going to provide. So this morning as we come to this, we hear Jesus not only with these Samaritans having difficulty, but even those who are kind of hanging around the edge. Apparently, it's not quite working as well back in those good old days as it might have. One young man or follower of Jesus announces loudly, "Lord, I will follow you wherever you go." Sort of echoing again the Old Testament in Ruth and Naomi, "Whithersoever thou goest, I will follow." You can't miss an opportunity to say whithersoever any chance you get. Not much you hear that these days. But Jesus looks at him and says, "That's all right, son, but you see, I don't have a special RV with me to keep you in comfort on our way. I have not loaded up, you see, the bus with those comforts of air conditioning at home and the champagne and the caviar. Foxes have holes, birds of the air have their nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." And apparently, that gentleman checked out in the campaign for moving forward towards the cross. He is just absorbing this failure, this lack of success, when he issues a summons, "Follow me," to another man, and that man says, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." Now, we don't know. Maybe his father's already dead. Maybe not. Maybe he thinks, well, let's give it a few years, Jesus, and we'll see how well things go. Then I'll join up with your posse. In response to him, Jesus creates a new occupation, that of the deceased mortician. "Let the dead bury the dead," Jesus says to him. So things are not going so well in this perfect past that we somehow envision of the way things were. The third person that Jesus meets is invited to come along, but he wants a little more time. He needs to go back and he needs to do the family values thing. See, he wants to go back and make sure that he bids farewell to all his family. And of course, in the ancient culture of the Orient, that was a long and involved process of bidding farewell to one's family. But Jesus keeps moving on, and he says to this gentleman, "No one who puts their hand on the steering wheel and is using their cell phone to text is fit for the kingdom of God." Just trying to bring it into a modern vernacular. Because I'm expecting not many of you have been at the plow recently. Maybe in the past you've had your hands on the plow, but you know just as much as anyone, any child on a bicycle or a motor scooter or what are those other things I was talking about? Skateboard, thank you. I try to avoid these things as much as possible. Dangerous stuff. I don't even want to look forward, let alone look back, but you certainly ought not to be on one of those and looking back. The past, my friends, was not perfect. Enter into that the United Church of Christ, and as we celebrate our anniversary Sunday for this denomination, we say God is still speaking. We say never put a period where God has placed a comma, because we believe that the past can be learned from, but it can't be lived in. Back on this particular Sunday in the 50s, 4 denominations that looked to the future and saw a possibility and a vision of God doing a new thing came together and said, we will be a united church of Christ, and we will seek to go the places that God is calling us in the future. So whatever the point of this series of encounters that we read about this morning, that seem to be loosely kind of connected and seem to point more to failure than anything else, I think we can draw 3 lessons. I am, after all, a preacher, and we're supposed to do this whole 3-point thing any given Sunday, are we not? So I would suggest to you there are at least three things we could draw from Jesus' encounters that did not seem to be successful, did not seem to be building the megachurch that might have been built, did not seem to apparently have led to his great inauguration as a leader of a new nation or a new movement. The first, I think, is the message that Jesus gives us is that Christ is not looking back and he will not be held back. So the disciples were all the time trying to hold Jesus back. Jesus announced that he was headed to the cross, and Peter says, "Lord, let it never be so." And what did Jesus do? He rebuked him, just like he did in this instance. You see, Jesus was moving forward on the mission that he had. There wasn't time to look back or to be held back by the standards that those around him set as being the method for desiring or for the measure of what it means to be successful. He could not be held back and did not spend time looking back. He invites us to look back at the past so as not to repeat it, but not to look back to keep us from moving forward. Moving forward is where Jesus was headed, and so his words were not, "Let us sit down and contemplate the past." His words were, "Follow me, because I'm headed to a place that is yet to be." So the first thing that I think we can draw from this is that Jesus wasn't sitting around waiting for some perfect past to be reborn or recreated or become about. The reality is, you and I all know that the past isn't perfect, except, of course, when you men married that woman of yours. That was your only perfect moment in the past. Remember? Keep that in mind. We want happy harmony, things at lunch. But otherwise, most of us have never reached perfection in the past. And so the reality is we need to keep moving forward and keep looking forward, knowing that God is moving and calling us in that direction. The second thing I think that this passage reminds us of is that the God who is evident in Jesus Christ is the God whose identity was revealed in his very name. The name that was impronounceable, that could not be said because it was not made up of anything that had been said before, but has been translated and spoken as the name Yahweh. It is translated and it means in the Scriptures itself, "I will be who I will be." God is the God of the future. And God is intending to be who God intends to be. And God is calling us into that future, knowing that it is God who is creating that future. It is the same God who has said, "I will be who I will be," who has said, "Fear not, for I am with you. I will be your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my victorious hand." So rather than sitting and worrying that somehow we have left God behind, we ought to be up and in motion, knowing that God is moving forward and only waiting long enough for those of us willing to move forward with the God who will be, who he will be. It is this invitation that God extends to us without regard to whether we have a past that is perfect, but instead knows that God intends a reality that is yet. So that brings us to the third thing that I think we